This is a recording studio. If you're watching this video, you're probably familiar. There's speakers, instruments, microphones, a computer, everything you need to make beautiful music.
And this is a farm. It's got cows. It has unbelievably cute piggies. Hey, buddies. But why am I at this farm instead of the recording studio where I do all my music work? Well, the answer is pretty simple. See, I work with a lot of musicians, and more musicians than I can count have told me that they would love to get a cabin in the woods for a week or two, bring their instruments, bring their bandmates, and come back with their best material yet to get creative and write a bunch of songs, come home with like 10 amazing tracks and make an album. And I understand why people want to do this. Albums like Bon Iver's For Emma Forever Ago or Radiohead's OK Computer were made in relative isolation. And they sold, hundreds of thousands or millions of copies, won lots of awards. So I understand why people want to do this. But the reality of the situation seems to me that most of the people I know will go to Joshua Tree or a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains and come back with a demo or two or half a demo. They've ate some great steaks, they drank some wine, they caught up with their bandmates and came back kind of empty-handed. But part of this channel is me trying to break down my biases, trying to learn, try to experiment so that you and I both can make more music and make better music. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is to see if I'm wrong about this method. So I'm at a farm in Nashville to work on music, to test out some theories, and to see if I can come up with the best way to make a trip like this worth it and to make it work so you don't waste your money and your time. Now, I am freezing. My hands are getting numb. It is like 20 degrees out and the roosters are going absolutely wild. So I'm going to take this video inside and let's talk about it.
So, about those biases, about the question at hand. Whenever folks have told me about their plans to go on a grand writing retreat, I usually meet it with cautious optimism, I guess. If you want my honest thoughts, though, going into this, my opinion would be that you may be better off focusing on finding ways to be more creative at home, to produce or write as much as you can while you're at home, and then if you want to take a vacation, just take the vacation. Instead of taking a coin flip's chance on whether or not you'll come back with some great music, just go on a real break, leave your music stuff behind, and come back refreshed and ready to work on tunes when you get back. But if it works for so many artists and producers that I look up to, there must be something to it, right? So I'm on a mission to see if I've got it backwards. Now, as with most things, traveling for songwriting and producing, it comes with its pros and cons. And understanding these is key in making sure that you're really getting the most out of your time and your money on a trip like this, which hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a good understanding of. And I also have some tips on how to get a lot of the benefits of a trip like this without having to travel at all, but that'll come later. So the main benefit of a retreat like this is the isolation, not in the sense of just being alone, more so that you've put some distance between yourself and normal life. Whenever you've got free time at home, there are a million different things competing for your attention. You can do chores, laundry, work on the landscaping, catch up on your Pokemon save. Basically, there's an excess of things to do besides the thing you really want to do. There's a certain guilt that comes with taking your time off to chase after your passion. So you can end up multitasking, doing things like taking breaks every hour to fold clothes. But when you're away, there is no temptation to do those things because it's simply impossible. Now, there are some chores that you may end up taking with you, and we'll talk about that later. But getting away from the physical space where your to-do list lives, that is a huge pro. Now, on the flip side, a potential con of a music retreat is that it might just not work with your style. While getting away from home is nice, leaving behind your typical routines can sometimes cause problems that you won't know about until they're happening. If you're someone who does better working in bursts, a few hours here and there, you may not realize that grindingly long sessions are really not good for you until you're on like day 4 in a row of working on music in the woods. If you're someone that works best on a familiar setup, with all of your tools right there. A beach house with a laptop and some headphones is a bad place to figure that out. But for some, that may actually end up being a benefit. The novelty of working on a minimal setup with a big change of scenery, well, that really might inspire you to try something new, to make something you wouldn't have made otherwise, making this con into maybe a pro. Now, one more con that often goes under the radar is that a trip like this can become a high-pressure situation rather quickly. A trip that was meant to inspire your best work, where everyone takes off a week from their jobs, finds a babysitter, and spends hundreds of dollars to make it happen, that type of pressure can really weigh on you. If you're halfway through the trip and you don't have that golden idea, the clock, it's ticking. And that anxiety can make it even harder to be productive or creative with every hour that passes by. So, how do we fight that feeling? And how do we make sure we get all of the pros without all of the cons? Now, let me break down this trip that I took and tell you what went right and what I'd do differently next time around. The first thing that I'm glad I did is booking a trip in a city that I'm already pretty familiar with. I've been to Nashville a good handful of times, so there wasn't a temptation to go out and explore every day. If I booked a trip to, say, Bora Bora or the Netherlands, it would feel like a waste of time to spend the whole trip cooped up in a makeshift studio. Now, I still did hit some of my favorite spots, but sightseeing definitely wasn't a priority, which is good. I'm also glad that I booked an Airbnb with 2 real bedrooms and a full kitchen. At first, I was looking into pull-out couch situations, but being able to get comfortable and having some space to myself was great. Now, my buddy Will did come with me, which was great, and I can't imagine we would have had as good of a time if we were cramped in a smaller space. Speaking of, bringing someone with you is definitely a good idea, especially if you're on the same page when it comes to your goals for the trip. Having some accountability and someone to bounce ideas off of, and someone to split some of the expenses with is all really helpful. I think we've all experienced that moment when you're trying to do everything on a song, the track, the lyrics, and the melody, and you just get stuck until you bring someone else in and suddenly everything just starts to click. That is a great feeling, and it does take a lot of the pressure off of yourself to do it all. Will and I both booked some co-writes with other producers and writers while we were there, which I think you should totally do if you're traveling to a music city. But we also held some days for ourselves to work on personal projects, which I think is great. Another thing I was really glad we did is buying groceries on day one. Not having to leave 3 times a day to go get food or spending time trying to figure out how to get coffee first thing in the morning, that was a huge help. Of course, we also had a few meals out and about and went to some coffee shops, but being able to skip that step is a great thing when you're trying to get locked in. One thing that was a huge help, which ties back to those chores I said you may accidentally bring with you, was to do a bit of a digital detox, if you will, before the trip. Before we left, I let everyone know that I was going to be gone for a week. So if they needed anything, to ask me beforehand, or else they'd have to wait until we're back. And then I turned my email notifications off, ignored my DMs, and conveniently misplaced my phone whenever I could. The last thing you want to do is go on a trip to work on music only to see your screen time actually go up. Now, another thing you definitely should do is bring some music work with you to fall back on. If you turn up with a totally blank slate, you run the risk of returning with a totally blank slate. But if you go in with some focus, with some tasks in progress and some momentum, it can really help you feel like you're getting the most out of your trip. Out of the 4 songs that I came back with, 2 of them started from ideas that were created before the trip, and I also used some of the free time to catch up on production and editing tasks for some songs that I've been needing to finish. That's not to say that you can't start things from scratch, but it is good to have a backup to turn to if the inspiration just isn't flowing. And I'm also really glad that I brought a decent amount of gear with me. It was definitely worth it because, for one, it's comfortable, and 2, anything that I recorded is usable. I'm not returning with a giant list of tracks that I need to re-record with real gear now that I'm home.
Now, real quick, I do want to send a quick thanks to Loudoun Audio for letting me borrow these LS208 microphones. They are amazing condenser mics that have really good background noise rejection. So obviously, if a truck drives past, that's loud. You're going to hear it in pretty much any mic. If a plane goes overhead, yeah, you're just going to pick it up. But the wind and the background noise and the subpar acoustics in this house, this mic is doing a really good job of rejecting all that stuff, so you can just focus on getting a great sound from your voice or from your guitar or whatever it is. So go ahead and check those out. I'll put a link in the description if you want to get one. Not sponsored or anything, but they did let me borrow this for this trip, and I've been loving it, so check it out.
So that's what went well, but I do want to talk about a few things that I would definitely do different next time around. For one, I really should have made a checklist of everything that I wanted to bring before I started packing. I ended up with almost everything I needed, but I forgot to bring a mic stand, so I had to go grab one at the music store down the street. Thankfully, finding a mic stand in Nashville is like finding a rock at Yellowstone, but if we had gone to a desert island, I would have had to fashion one out of bamboo shoots or something. Another thing I wish I brought is the producer planner, which I accidentally left sitting on my studio desk where it lives 99% of the time. Thankfully, since this trip was pretty unstructured, it wasn't a big deal, but when I'm home working on music, this thing is a lifesaver for keeping track of appointments and revisions that I need to send out, plus all my daily tasks. I put this book together to help producers like myself stay organized, and if you want to grab one for yourself, the link is in the description. Just don't be like me and forget to bring it with you when you go on a retreat. Now, another mistake I made is not thinking about my voice. Thankfully, I didn't have to do too much singing, but I forgot how much of a toll travel can take on your singing voice. On one of the nights, I went to a concert with some friends, and we did a little bar hopping afterwards, and talking over loud music really did not help either. So, if you're someone who sings a lot, that is definitely something to keep in mind. Another thing I do differently, honestly, is that I would have flown instead of driving. It's about an 11-hour trek both ways from Orlando to Nashville and back, and while it was cool to drive so I could bring more of my gear, I would have survived with a travel-sized MIDI keyboard and no pedal steel. If I flew, realistically, it would have given me almost 2 whole days of riding back. Now, on the flip side, having a car the entire trip was really nice, and it was cheaper to drive compared to flights and renting a car or paying for rideshare every day. So the jury is still out on this one, I guess, but you should definitely weigh your options before booking anything. So, should you book a writing trip? If money and free time are unlimited, of course, the answer is yes. But if it may be a stretch on your budget or your calendar, or you just want to maximize your time, there are some things that you can do to get the benefits of a writing retreat without the retreat. So before you go and book a big trip, I think a smart first step would be to take a 4-day weekend or use some PTO and have a little retreat in your own studio. Tell your partner, your family, your clients that you're taking a couple of days by yourself to work on music uninterrupted, and then do a mock writing retreat right in your very own studio. Get some candles, some color changing bulbs, whatever you need to do to change up the vibe, and then see how productive you can be. If halfway through day 2 you are drained and out of ideas, then maybe booking 2 weeks in the Andes isn't for you. If you get to the other side with a ton of new material, then you have options. You can just repeat this again in a few weeks or months or whenever it's convenient and spend $0. Or you can feel a little more confident that your working style meshes with traveling to write and then book something for yourself. Another thing we often forget to do when we're home is working with other people just for the sake of creating. In my week in Nashville, I did more co-writing than I normally do in a typical month. And while it was great to work with the folks that I did, there's no reason that I shouldn't be doing the same thing here with producers and writers close to home. So whether or not you can travel, I think it is smart to set up some sessions with like-minded folks just to get the wheels turning and see what you can create together. Another thing you can do is to make a change of scenery right where you live. The isolation aspect of blocking off your schedule is one thing, But you can also recreate the novelty of travel by putting together a tiny rig and doing some work on a laptop with the headphones somewhere cool. You could bring your computer to your favorite cafe while you're tuning vocals or working on arrangements for tracks. You could bring a notebook and your AirPods to the park and write lyrics with a pretty view. There is no rule saying that you can only work on music in your studio or on an exotic retreat. So get inventive and see if changing your surroundings helps you get the juices flowing. If it does, great. If not, then now you know, and you can save your sky miles for a destination wedding that you low-key wish you didn't get invited to. And with a little effort, some creative thinking, and not a lot of money, you really can get a lot of the perks of traveling to work on music without the costs. So I say give it a shot and see how it goes. What's the worst that could happen? So that's all nice, but I went on this trip to find the answer to a question. Was I wrong about traveling to produce music or songwriting being a bit of a waste? And the answer is, yeah, I think I was, but with an asterisk. I do still believe that you may end up going on a retreat and coming back with nothing, and that it's something you have to weigh the pros and cons of before making a big commitment. But at the end of the day, if it's something you want to do and you're going into it with a healthy attitude, with realistic expectations, I say go for it. As for me, I'm already thinking about some potential trips for next year, but it's not something I'm rushing into. And last, but most importantly, if you've gone on a trip like this before and you came back with nothing spectacular to show for it, that's okay. Chances are you probably needed the rest, the time to reconnect with the people you work with, the reset that comes with getting yourself out of your day-to-day routine. If you went to a cabin in the woods and you didn't come back with For Emma Forever Ago or OK Computer, but instead with some fond memories and a tighter bond with the people you love, then call it a win. Now, if you enjoyed this video, the best thing you can do to help the channel is to share it with someone that you think might find it useful. And if you want more music production videos every week, then subscribe and then watch this video next. I promise you'll like it.